Sexual assault, abuse, and harassment are among the most pervasive and devastating violations of human dignity. These acts fracture lives, silence voices, and perpetuate cycles of trauma that ripple across generations. To speak about these issues is to confront uncomfortable truths about power, vulnerability, and the societal structures that too often enable harm instead of preventing it. This is not a conversation we can afford to shy away from, not when countless individuals carry the weight of these experiences in silence, not when systems fail to hold perpetrators accountable, and not when the very fabric of our communities is torn by indifference or complicity. At its core, sexual violence is about control. It is a manifestation of entitlement, a weaponization of power to dominate, humiliate, or exploit another person. It knows no boundaries of age, gender, race, or socioeconomic status. A child abused by a trusted adult, a student harassed by a professor, an employee coerced by a supervisor, a partner violated in what should be the safety of a relationship. These are not isolated incidents. They are threads in a larger tapestry of systemic harm. The common thread is the abuse of power, whether physical, emotional, or institutional. To understand this crisis, we must first acknowledge its universality. Survivors exist in every community, often unnoticed, their stories buried under shame, fear, or societal pressure to remain silent. The impact of sexual violence is profound and enduring. Survivors grapple with a spectrum of emotions: rage, grief, numbness, and a shattered sense of safety. Many face post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety, or struggles with trust and intimacy. The trauma does not end when the assault does. It echoes in everyday moments. A sound, a scent, a phrase, that trigger memories of violation. Relationships strain under the weight of unspoken pain. Careers, education, and aspirations are derailed by the psychological toll. For some, the journey toward healing is lifelong, marked by resilience but also by the recognition that certain wounds never fully close. Yet society frequently compounds this suffering. Survivors who come forward are met with skepticism, victim blaming, or invasive scrutiny of their choices. What were you wearing? Why didn't you fight back? Are you sure you didn't lead them on? These questions shift blame from perpetrators to victims, implying that survival is contingent on perfect behavior. This cultural tendency to doubt and shame survivors creates a climate of impunity. Perpetrators operate with the knowledge that their actions will likely go unchallenged, while survivors weigh the cost of speaking out against the risk of re-traumatization, stigma, or professional retaliation. Harassment, too, operates on a spectrum of harm. It might begin with jokes or comments that objectify, degrade, or intimidate. It thrives in environments where such behavior is dismissed as locker room talk, or harmless flirtation. But these microaggressions are the roots of a toxic culture. They normalize disrespect, erode boundaries, and signal that certain spaces, workplaces, schools, public venues, are not safe for marginalized groups, particularly women and LGBTQ+ individuals. When harassment escalates unchecked, it paves the way for more egregious violations. The line between a lewd comment and a physical assault is often blurred by the same attitudes that excuse both: the belief that some people's bodies and autonomy are less worthy of respect. Abuse within intimate relationships further complicates the narrative. Domestic violence and sexual coercion are frequently shrouded in secrecy, masked by the illusion of a loving partnership. Survivors may struggle to identify their experiences as abusive, particularly if physical violence is absent. Emotional manipulation, gaslighting, and isolation can trap individuals in cycles of control, making escape seem impossible. The societal myth that abuse is a private matter discourages intervention, leaving survivors to navigate danger alone. Even when they do seek help, they may encounter law enforcement or legal systems ill-equipped to address the nuances of psychological and sexual violence. Marginalized communities bear a disproportionate burden of this violence. Women of color, indigenous peoples, LGBTQ+ individuals, people with disabilities, and those living in poverty face intersecting forms of oppression that heighten vulnerability and limit access to justice. For example, transgender individuals experience alarmingly high rates of sexual assault, yet their reports are often met with transphobic dismissal or violence. Immigrant survivors may fear deportation if they contact authorities. These disparities reveal how systemic inequities, racism, homophobia, xenophobia, ableism, compound the trauma of sexual violence, silencing voices and eroding trust in institutions meant to protect. The digital age has introduced new dimensions to harassment and abuse. Cyberstalking, non-consensual pornography, revenge porn, and online threats amplify the reach of perpetrators, allowing them to torment victims across platforms and time zones. Social media, while a tool for advocacy, also hosts spaces where misogyny and threats flourish anonymously. Survivors navigating online abuse often find themselves battling tech companies slow to remove harmful content or law enforcement agencies unfamiliar with digital crimes. The virtual world mirrors the physical one, a place where power can be weaponized to intimidate and silence. Amid these challenges, the courage of survivors and advocates has sparked global movements. Campaigns like #MeToo have broken decades of silence, exposing the pervasiveness of sexual violence and demanding accountability. Survivors have turned pain into purpose, sharing stories to dismantle stigma and push for systemic change. Their voices remind us that healing is possible, but it requires collective action. Believing survivors is not enough. We must create structures that prevent harm in the first place. Prevention begins with education. Comprehensive, age-appropriate curricula on consent, boundaries, and healthy relationships must be integrated into schools from an early age. Children should learn that their bodies are their own, that no is a complete sentence, and that respect is non-negotiable. Adults, too, need unlearning, interrogating ingrained biases, challenging harmful stereotypes, and modeling accountability. Bystander intervention training can empower communities to disrupt harmful behavior before it escalates, whether by confronting a friend's sexist remark or supporting someone at risk in a social setting. Institutions must be overhauled to prioritize safety over reputation. Colleges, corporations, religious organizations, and government bodies have too often shielded perpetrators to avoid scandal. Transparent reporting mechanisms, survivor-centered policies, and independent oversight are critical to rebuilding trust. Legal reforms are equally urgent. Statutes of limitations that bar survivors from seeking justice, inadequate protections for workplace harassment, and loopholes that allow abusive partners to retain custody or access to firearms must be addressed. Support for survivors must be holistic and accessible. Trauma-informed healthcare, free counseling services, and emergency housing can provide lifelines for those fleeing violence. Economic empowerment programs can reduce dependency on abusive partners. Legal aid ensures survivors navigate complex systems without further hardship. Crucially, these resources must be culturally competent, addressing the unique needs of diverse communities. Healing is not a linear process, and survivors deserve compassion at every stage. Art, literature, and media play a pivotal role in shifting cultural narratives. Stories that center survivors' humanity, rather than sensationalizing their pain, foster empathy. Representation matters. Portraying healthy relationships, consent, and strong, nuanced characters from all backgrounds challenges the normalization of abuse. Journalists and content creators have a responsibility to report on sexual violence ethically, avoiding graphic details that re-traumatize and focusing on systemic solutions rather than individual blame. Men and boys must be active allies in this work. Toxic masculinity, the belief that dominance, aggression, and sexual conquest define manhood, fuels cycles of violence. Challenging these norms, promoting emotional literacy, and encouraging men to hold each other accountable disrupts the cultural scaffolding that upholds abuse. Fathers, mentors, coaches, and peers can model respect, teaching younger generations that strength lies in integrity, not control. This is not a women's issue. It is a human issue. Sexual violence diminishes us all, perpetuating fear and distrust where there should be solidarity. To eradicate it, we must confront the uncomfortable reality that many of us have been complicit, through silence, through laughter at a problematic joke, through assumptions about who is deserving of safety. Change begins in everyday choices, listening without judgment, advocating for policy reforms, donating to survivor funds, voting for leaders committed to justice. There is no quick fix, no single law or campaign that will undo centuries of oppression. Progress will be messy, iterative, and fraught with setbacks. But history shows that collective action can transform the unimaginable into the inevitable. The fight against sexual violence is a fight for a world where dignity is not a privilege but a birthright, where every person can live, work, love, and dream without fear. That world is possible. It is worth every ounce of our effort, our courage, and our hope. Let us move forward not as adversaries, but as allies in the shared work of healing and justice. The stories of survivors are not just tales of trauma, they are testaments to resilience. They remind us that even in the darkest moments, the human spirit endures. To stand with survivors is to honor their strength, to amplify their voices, and to demand a future where no one else has to whisper, "Me too." Let that future begin today.